Um, well, hi, I'm Ann Choquette. I'm the CEO of The List. We are a community of women and non-binary leaders who are devoted, underline devoted, to helping each other achieve and succeed. Um, Emma and Kate are both members of The List with new books about, around, pre, during, post divorce, which is, as they will tell you, one of the most important decisions that you can make, and to make it right and to make it as less painful as possible. I thought about writing into the email, "Have a happy divorce," but I wasn't sure if
Yeah,
that,
that's
I
a
think that's,
hotly debated
yeah,
move.
I think we're not quite getting to a happy divorce, but maybe like a less
Not
painful,
not so awful divorce. How
not
about
so awful divorce.
that? Yeah.
Um, I'm thrilled to have these amazing women here. I will put links to their books in the chat so that you can read all of their brilliance. And I'm going to go on mute for a second and let them introduce themselves and kick off the conversation. So welcome to Emma and Kate.
Thank you, Anne.
Thanks so much, Anne. Thank you for all of it. All of it. Emma, you want to introduce yourself first?
I'm feeling a little self-conscious, like it looks like I have a hazy filter on my screen, but for the record, I do not.
It does not. You look gorgeous.
I'm not trying to cover anything up, but anyways, so yeah, Emma Johnson, and I've been a journalist my whole career, and a dozen years ago, I started blogging about being a single mom, and out of that work, I became very passionate about the issue around advocating for equal parenting time. And I had to do a lot of eating a lot of humble pie, realizing I was very wrong about my assumptions about parenting roles, what a divorce should look like, or even could look like. I'd expand my imagination and just found myself really diving into the research. So my new book is The 50/50 Solution: the surprisingly simple choice that makes moms, dads, and kids happier and healthier after they split. So that might mean you're divorced, maybe you're never in a relationship with your kid's parent, other parent, separated, whatever. We all know families look like a million different things, but when the parents do not live in the same house, equal parenting time, and all the science supports this, equal parenting time is really what's going to fare best for almost all families, with a few caveats. So that's been my give back, and that's what we're doing. That's what I'm up to these days. And Kate, we've known each other for a long time, both being divorce nerds in this divorce space, and you're doing important work too. So tell us about what you do.
Yeah. So, yeah, Emma and I have, been around each other for at least a decade, probably longer. And so I'm a coach. I'm certified as a domestic violence advocate, as a high conflict divorce coach, as a regular old life coach, relationship systems coach. So I've got sort of all of this training in all of these areas. And for the last decade, I've been working with women, a lot of it in the should I stay or should I go space, helping women make this really difficult decision. My book is The D Word: Making the Ultimate Decision About Your Marriage. And it really is sort of a step-by-step guide on how to make the best decision for yourself and your children. As a divorce coach, so I think Emma and I are in, I think we have a lot of areas that we absolutely completely agree on, and some areas that we have differences of opinions on, and which is great. But I work so much, unfortunately, I work so much in the field of domestic violence that, I have a lot of we'll get into it, but that is one of the things that I have found most difficult in my work over the last 10 years, is that I never really set out to be a domestic violence advocate. I never set out to be certified in this and to help women in this. But having been a victim myself, it is something that I sort of talked about, and then found an overwhelming need for more and more women coming to me with stories that, you know, some of which are quite horrifying and some of which are just like not okay, right? So, but I think, you know, Emma and I are both sort of staunch feminists who are out to sort of close the gender pay gap and have women live really extraordinary lives on their own terms. And, you know, I think having equal shared parenting is definitely a way to do that. And it is very much against so much of what we've been taught and conditioned.
Yeah, I mean, that's so my book, it's really just it's advocacy and reporting. Like my notes section, I think is 30 or 40 pages long, but which is it's such a painful project, but it does have a little bit of my memoir in it. And I talk about really having to face my brand of feminism that I've been carrying for my whole life, right? And just absorbing a lot of assumptions about what equality means, what is going on with women today, what gender, you know, and really having to tear down my own belief system to really get to what I believe to be true, you know, and so it's been challenging. It's very interesting. I'm 47. I think you and I are probably about the same age, Kate, roughly.
I'm 53.
Well, we're the same generation.
We're the same, right? We're Gen X, right? We're still
Yeah. Well, see, I was Gen Y, but everyone forgot about Gen Y, whatever. Like we would have probably gone to the same high school, roughly, or but anyways. We're in the same thing. I think our kids are both teenagers, so like we get each other. We're like same demo.
Yeah.
And one of the conclusions I came to, like all the reporting I did, it's like I really do find there's a divide as illustrated by, we'll call it divorce, separated families, divorce. There's a real divide of like old feminists and young feminists. Old women that are our age and older did our divorces and co-parenting very differently than younger parents today. Like it is so heartening to me. Like younger people throughout this country, there's just there are states that have equal parenting laws passed. Where just for the record, those people watching, so there's a movement. The movement that I'm part of is to make it a rebuttable presumption of equal parenting, and that can be the law. It can be culture, right? If we have good culture, we don't need laws. So the presumption is that kids live equal time with both parents. And for 30, 40 years now, there's been a presumption of equal legal custody, joint custody. Everybody has equal say in where the kids go to school, medical decisions, like the big ones, there's legal custody. And now we're just like, let's just take this up further and do equal time. And here's bazillion study to show why that's the best thing. So younger people just do it. Like a lot of them just are like, why? I'm like, why am I writing this book? Like it's a done deal, but there is still a huge gap. The laws aren't supporting the families where there is conflict. They can't get there, which that puts people at risk for abuse, right? When the courts are clogged up with petty bickering, there's no room for cases that really need some legal intervention. So anyways, I guess I just wanted to say that like, I'm very heartened, but I had to like really get out there and talk to a lot of people and to understand what's going on. And I see it just like walking around the streets in my neighborhood, younger, like dads are so much more involved. There's just such a wonderful collaborative energy with younger people that is, you know, putting us all old ladies to shame.
I love, you know, I love the way that millennials and Gen Z are doing relationships now. Like I have conversations with my son all the time about this, and he's been in a, you know, committed relationship for 2 years now. And but yet there are no rules. There are no, you know, I try to say like, well, what are you guys? And he's like, what do you mean? You know, early on. And you know, there's more communication. Look, they're growing up in an age, for better or worse, where they have access to, you know, the internet and TikTok and Instagram in ways that yeah, I hear you, Natalie.
It's wild. Well, tell me, I'm very curious about like in your work, right? Because you do one work with women, whether they should stay or go. And I'm curious about how the custody piece of it plays
It's
into it and hangs them up.
Listen, it's a huge thing. You know, so many women don't want to. What I was going to say, I just want to finish that thought, is that, you know, having access to Instagram and Facebook and or TikTok and all of these things where they actually learn communication skills. They
Oh,
actually,
interesting.
right? Like there are, if they're following the right people, right? There's access to understanding, you know, things that shit that we never like how to have a healthy relationship. It's out there on the internet, right? We didn't have that. And our models, we certainly didn't have it in our parents, like for the most part. I don't know you guys, but um, so you know what I mean? Like I think they just have so much more access to information now. But to answer your question, yes, Emma, yes. The conversations that I have with my clients and in my Facebook group, which is, you know, sort of overrun, is, you know, people say, I don't want to be away from I don't want to be away from my kids. I don't want to be away from my kids. My kids are my life. And to me, that's like, you know, waving a really like kind of big red flag, right? Yes, our kids are our lives. Yes, they are our hearts. They're our hearts walking outside of our bodies. Yes, I get it. But, you know, the first thing that I tend to say to women is like, and I have, you know, you got to say this gently, right? But if your kids are your life, we have a problem.
You need to get a life. You're
Yeah,
welcome.
well, yeah,
Sports is going to help you do that.
right. And I'm not going to say that as overtly, but that is, you know, and I have a chapter on this in my book too, but, you know, that we have to examine your life. And as, you know, you write in your book and I write in my book, this myth of being a stay-at-home mom, being the pinnacle and the, you know, the brass ring is so dangerous because it does then become, you know, we don't have anything else. And so don't take my babies away. If my entire identity is stay-at-home mom or mom, you know, I can't, yes, and the trad wife movement, right? And so we have to start there. So when they say that they don't want to leave because they don't want to lose time with their children, the first thing I say is, well, let's build essentially, let's think about who you are outside of motherhood. And I also have a lot of women, because I've trained them well, and as have you, that say, you know, like, yeah, I want 50-50. I want equal shared parenting because I know, because I work, because, right. But I'm worried about what that will mean. Like, because I have traditionally done all of the domestic labor, he doesn't do shit, blah, 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 blah. And you know, my response to them is, you got to let them fail.
Yeah.
You got to let them
And
figure it out.
yeah, it is. And there's like, yeah, I spent a lot of time on that. And men too, saying like, I wasn't given the opportunity to parent
Right.
when
That's right.
I was in my relationship. You know, she took over and she seemed like she's doing a great job. A lot of them will say. So I just took this back seat. And then, like you said, like, you know, we make mistakes every minute of our parenting lives, and just going through that is how you learn.
Yeah.
Right. And it's learning. There was a a therapist, family therapist, that she had a great term, called it gritty parenting. Right. So when you
Mm,
listen, like a weekend parent, weekend dad, you don't have to do the grind of running the kids around, getting
right.
their asses in their shoes and out the door on time, and all those
Right.
things that are just the grind of parenting that we would love to have. You know, in your worst moments, you wish you could outsource that 80% of the time, but that's what makes you a good parent. That's how you learn. That's how you connect with your kid and gain confidence in yourself as a dad, right?
That's
You
right.
just have,
Absolutely.
and I also say, look, anthropologically, people have had, by the time you're 16 years old, you had 3 kids and a divorce, right? So like parenting is not this elevated art and science. It is
That's
not. Your
right. That's
job
right.
is to keep those kids alive, give them a hug once a week, give them a vegetable once a month, and that's it. Right? Like this
Right.
hyper parenting thing is holding back these co-parenting relationships, exactly how you
I
described.
think you're,
And it's
yeah,
holding women back because we're not working so that we can like micro engineer perfect childhoods for our kids. And that's not serving anyone. And
it's
there's
not.
so much science out there that's showing that that brand of parenting is raising a generation of anxious, non-functional young adults now.
Absolutely. And, you know, look at millennials, like, right, because the millennials were the first, um, you know, helicopter generation,
Products.
right? And so at first we gave them so much shit when they were like in their 20s. And now, by the way, they're awesome. Now, like they're in their 30s, they're kicking ass, and I love it because they're doing everything differently. They're breaking all of the molds. They're like, yeah, what you guys are doing, that didn't work. Like, fuck off out
Oh,
of
they're
here.
rebelling against their helicopter upbringing. Yeah.
Like creating an entire different way of, of working, of, being in relationships, ethical non-monogamy, like all of the things that sort of has come from this really from the millennials. I think it's great. I think it's amazing.
I'm more cynical about it. I'm like, TBD. You guys go do you, and let's like have a couple studies about it in a couple years and see how
Yeah.
that's working out for everybody.
Right. TBD. TBD. So far,
Yeah, I mean, so when, there's so
I
much
have hope.
change,
Listen, I
it's like,
have hope.
we'll see how that is. I'm not
Yeah.
going to give it an automatic thumbs up. I'll sit back here and pass my judgment.
Well, I mean, I think, but they're also not getting married, right? They're the ones who are like, these systems, not so much. And I'm not really mad about that, I gotta say.
Well,
How do you feel
if
about
you get into science, like, married people are happier. And it's not just about the individuals too. Like when, we have a declining birth rate, there's larger, like, what's the larger sociological cost of that? Right? It's like,
that?
yeah, your parents marriage, and like you're dating for you, but like largely as a society, I'm starting to work on my beliefs in this. I'm kind of processing the research that I'm finding on this. It's like marriage, babies. No one's mandating anything. We're not talking about like, Handmaid's Tale situations here, but it's just in general, I think there is a place for policy that does support family choices that benefit the larger society and supports them. So, I mean, whether we're talking about homeownership or supporting people, I mean, we need policies that support kids. That's the bottom line. If you can't afford, if you're worried that your kids are gonna, it's an unhealthy environment because we have horrible environmental policy, we have lousy education system sucks, which it does. Okay, as a society, we need to fix those for the current babies and encouraging more babies to be born. So, I don't know, my 2 cents on
Yeah.
that.
No, I mean, listen, our education system is, beyond tragic and broken, but also deliberately so. So, it's like we can't, where do we, I think there's so much more deeper systemic stuff than, it's a lot.
So here, like for people watching this, that are maybe like thinking about divorce, or maybe they're going through it, or they're not unhappy with their co-parenting situation. Like, let's
Yeah.
say, what would be like the top 3 things that your top 3 nuggets of advice that are like, when, like, maybe there were things that surprised the women that you work with. They're like, what? I don't know about that, but that you win them over and it changes their lives for the better. Like, what are the top 3
Well,
things?
one of them that I think I learned from you early on was this idea that 50-50 equal shared parenting is better for women. That you will be able to go to work, get a job, make more money, have a self, really, like you get to determine who you are by having equal shared parenting, that this is actually a good idea. It's good for children. It's very good for children to have healthy relationships with both parents. That is the ideal. The other thing that surprises people is that because I work with a lot of domestic violence, and by the way, I work mostly with emotional abuse and financial abuse, and not as much with, I mean, there are obviously physical stuff as well, but that still having 50%, even having shared parenting time with someone who has been abusive to you, or is even abusive to the kids, if they're a yeller, if they're a rager, if they're physically abusive, that none of this applies, right? If they're beating your children, this does not apply. But
No.
even if they're emotionally abusive, if they're a rager, right? 9 times out of 10, it's because these people have no emotional skills, no therapy, lots of trauma, right? Like, and that even so, Staying in a relationship in order to try to mitigate and control that is a terrible idea, because you're simply perpetuating the model of this is what marriage is. This is what a relationship is.
Because
This is
there's
what
no way that can't be codependent. There's no way.
there's no way. Exactly. Exactly. And they say, but I can run interference. And it's like, no, you're not. What you're doing is co-signing the behavior, because you're still there. You can't say that what he's doing is not okay and still be there. You're giving your children mixed messages. And that the research has shown very clearly that that children need one healthy, happy, safe home. Even if the other one is emotionally fraught, or there's rage and yelling or whatever, what you're doing is giving them the gift of perspective. You're giving them the opportunity to say, I feel this way in one home and I feel this way in the other home. And you're giving their central nervous system time to like relax, let go, calm down. You're giving them choice for their futures. And that's a really big, that's a hard thing for moms to be like, oh my God, I have to let go and, let the kids have whatever relationship they're going to have with dad. And by the way, oftentimes it's a lot better than they thought it was going to be, right?
Because
Because
it's not your marriage. It's like the marriage was triggering something there,
sure,
right?
sure. Yeah, exactly.
Totally. And
Yeah,
it is, I just have keep coming to, and this was a surprising realization that I had. I don't know,
yeah,
somebody just said this to me. Like, I think one of the moms in my mom group put
yeah.
this up to me. It's like, that is their dad,
That is their
right?
dad.
That
That's
is their
right.
dad. We are
That's right.
not in the business of the state coming into families and deciding a better home. We don't re-educate Native children in boarding schools anymore. That is not the state's job.
Right.
Right? We don't grill married dads when they take babies home, or mothers. There's no vetting process to take your baby home from the hospital,
I wish
right?
that.
We are,
Yes.
right? This is
Yeah.
a basic human right that children are entitled to be parented by their parents, and
Yep.
parents are on a basic humanitarian level parent their children. That is a basic human right,
That's right.
right?
Yep.
And it is like, as women, we have been given this power, right, that we have power over the domestic sphere. And that is why it's so easy for women to go and get custody of their kids. Like, that is why women have kids. That is why men are deferring to the moms, even in perfectly
Yeah.
normal, healthy families. Women have that power. So we're like, we just assume, as did I, super guilty of this myself, just
Yeah.
continue. Well, like, I'm obviously the better parent, so the kids should be with me and I get to make the decisions. This is like a no-brainer. In my mind, it was like zero brainer.
Right.
That's their dad. Right. And we're
Yeah.
also, the other thing too is like, I've been thinking about this a lot beyond divorce too. So like, if we talk about things like, everything is just like so binary and black and white, like our little pea brains can only process easy equations. For example, if we want to talk about like banned books in schools, that's easy because it's like the book's in the library or it's not in the library. It doesn't matter what the answer is. American schools are still fucked, right? Like, that's a big, hard problem. And we want like a quick little yes or no, right? And it's the
Yeah.
same thing. There's a lot of those lessons applied, or it's like binary gender bathrooms. Like, either they're, open to everybody or they're closed to everybody, right? It's like one or the other. That's still not addressing like prejudice against queer people. It's a lazy way of looking at things. And when it comes to divorced families, I feel like that's something you can measure. It's like 50-50, right?
Yeah.
That's not speaking to the depth of your relationship with the kids. It's not talking about the bazillion other things that parents need to do for their kids or that kids
Right.
need, right?
Yes.
It's just
Yep.
hours, and you can measure the hours. You can't measure the depth of your emotional connection with your kid. And it's the same thing with money. You can measure how much he makes and how much you make and what's the blah, 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 because it's measurable and it's lazy, but we
Yeah.
become obsessed with it because we can see it on paper.
We also, I wonder what your thoughts are on this. The idea of like, it's that the kids are somehow like divisible by two, that like, we're counting the hours, we're counting the minutes. Like, well, you had an extra 5 hours on Saturday because you took them to this. So now I have to have 5 hours. And it's like, Jesus Christ, can't we have everybody just like enjoy their children and like, so we took them to Disneyland. Great. Your kids got to go to Disneyland.
Right. And so what, they come home, my kids are like, they just go in the room for 5 hours. It's now like It's not like we're sitting there and playing cards and talking about old grandma. Like there's nothing, like it's just some hours.
Literally. So my son, he's 18 and he lives with me full time now. And, you know, there are a variety of reasons for that, but mostly because by the time he was 16, he was like, hey guys, I'm done. Like, I'm done with this going back and forth. And
Hmm.
it's hard to argue, but it also fell at a time when his dad had kind of done some things that were pretty terrible, and blew up the family. And he was like, I'm done with him, but I'm also done with going back and forth. No big deal, right? They have healed their rift, right? And we are all everyone's fine.
By the time kids are 15, 16, 17, they are young adult. It's so, I mean, that's the trick with teenagers. Are they kids or are they adults, right? But
Right. That's right. He
yeah.
gets to stay, right? But here's the thing, right? My ex is constantly saying to me, he's like, yeah, but you're so lucky because he's like there all the time. And I'm like, dude, I don't see him. He's here, but like I see socks, I see dishes, I see mess, I see random teenagers in and out of my home all day long. When you see him, you go out to lunch, you go out to dinner, you do shit like it's like focused time, right? So, you know,
Yeah,
know,
but it's, you know, we all like, none of us 100% heal from our breakups, right? And it's like,
yeah,
you're
right.
right, those lawyers office arguing about things. I wanted to talk about Sherry's, and this is where I just want to take an opportunity to like share the research that really has changed my life and my work, it informs my work. But she said something, you know, you and I were talking about 50-50 is really great. And it's what we want to advocate for almost all families with some caveats.
Yeah.
And she said, but only if both parents are healthy.
Mm,
And this is where, like, one, what's the cost of proving someone's healthy?
that's right.
Bazillions of dollars and heartache through legal processes, probably, right?
And
Um,
who says?
excuse me?
And who says?
And who says, right? Do you want to argue? Do you want a judge to argue? Do you want a guardian ad litem? All of this ugliness, right?
Yeah.
It's right.
Yeah.
And the
Mhm.
other part of it, I just want to share some research that's like, to me, is seals the deal. Like I always say, like, I have no opinions. I'm just a messenger of the science. I just want to bring this huge body of science to the public. I feel like that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I mean, there's so much research around shared parenting. So in the history, this issue has been around forever, since we've been divorcing since the 60s and 70s in mass. And there's been a lot of studies around shared parenting. And those scientists were always looking at families where there was a minimum of 35% time with one parent. That's how they called shared parenting, because people just weren't doing 50-50. There wasn't that many families where they could
No,
actually study it. So
sure.
all this, it's like, it's remarkable how the shared parenting, so we're talking, you know, approximately equal time, is so beneficial to, if we're just talking about the children, even when there's conflict, even when the parents don't decide it, right? One of the big pushbacks I often get is, oh, well, it's fine for, like, you know, Gwyneth Paltrow said, just like, if they are like great friends and they get along great and they choose it themselves, then it works. But for the rest of us, no way. No, even when a judge orders it or a social worker encourages or whatever, it's still, this kids still have better outcome, and on and on. Even when we're controlling for socioeconomic factors. This is not just for rich white people, right, who have lots of therapists. No, this is really, the outcomes are better. And actually, more recently, there's a wonderful child psychologist at Arizona State University, Dr. Fabricius, who's been working on this issue for years. And he has a wonderful way of, he does great research, but he has a wonderful way about talking about it. And his research is revealing that it's actually, the closer you get to that 50-50 number, the better outcomes are for kids. And why is that? Because historically, dads do check out. Dads are marginalized as occasional visitors in their kids' lives, and they check out, go elsewhere, start other families, whatever. They're not, and kids inherently understand that, right? So they know. So when that number is 50-50 in those children's hearts and minds, it's secure, makes them just feel so much more secure. Their dads are not going to check out, that they are important to both of their parents.
Okay.
So that number, you know, it's 50-50. Somebody goes 5 hours at Disneyland, someone goes away the weekend. Like, the numbers are never going to be exactly 50-50, but the spirit of it is 50-50.
Spirit, that's right.
And that's the
Mhm.
spirit of it. And I often say that's like, we have got to be creating a culture of grace in general, like national politics, all the way down to families in your neighborhood, where there is room for somebody to have a chronic illness, have a mental health
Right.
challenge, struggling with addiction, they're deployed. Maybe they have a very challenging, a big work project. Yeah, they got promoted, whatever. They're caring for an elderly parent, where that there is room for some flexibility, but the goal is always to get back to equality,
That's
right?
right. And I love
And
what you,
yes,
yeah, sorry. I love what you said about the spirit of equality, right? Because even if the time isn't equal, if we're saying, hey, you know what? Dad's really sick right now, or dad has to go away for a little while. So you're going to spend more time with mom, but dad is no less of a father, is no less of a parent. He's still right. And this is what we do, right? We can ebb
support each
and flow
other.
and support each other, right? Because look, when I've been sick, my ex had to pick up extra time with my son, and then when it was his turn to go to rehab or whatever it is, right? I picked it up, not just for my kid, but for his other kid too, because that's the family that we've created, and that's our
Yes.
right.
When you have that, I've seen that too, like just a family I know in my community too. Exactly. Like it becomes, everything changes when there's that level of respect for each other. And it doesn't mean you have to like them. It does not mean that you have to like enjoy their company, that you don't bitch at each other or there's conflict, but you can still have that mutual respect.
Yeah. And it's, look, I know I hear all the time from women in my communities like, yeah, well, that's nice for you, but my ex is blah, blah, blah. And, sometimes I'll say, you know what? Sometimes you just kind of have to be the one, right? And sometimes it's not safe. And I get it. It's not emotionally safe. It's not physically safe. Absolutely. We draw the line. I had a client who was divorcing a man who had been divorced before. And his first divorce, there were no kids. He packed his bag in the middle of the night and he left. And that's how he got divorced. And so now here they were, they had a 17-year-old kid. They had been married for a long time. And she was letting him know that she was done and that, they were going to be getting divorced. And he kept trying to make it this other thing, right? He was trying because that's all he knew was, horror and, we're not going to talk and it's going to be terrible. And I said to her, I said, what if you just said to him, honey, I hear you, but that's just not how we're doing it. That's just not how we're going to do it.
She
And
rose above. She did a Michelle Obama and she went
she
high.
did. She went high. So she kept saying, like, he kept like, "Rah," and she was like, we're not
She's,
going to do that.
you're helping women reinvent divorce.
I I'm trying. I'm trying, right? Well,
Right.
and too, like with the conversation, I script it and I work it out with them to have the least impact possible for the children. To have this conversation in an intentional, in an empathic, in a kind way, even if it is a nightmare, to be able to say to somebody, I'm so glad we created children together, or thank you for the life that we've had. This isn't working for me anymore. And I really want to make sure that we can create something, great on the other side. Right. And they're going to have all of their feelings and yelling and all the things about it. And then you come back to, I get it. I get it. This is really hard. Let's talk about this when things have calmed down. Right. So that you're not going off into the insanity with them. You're sort of holding space and a container for collaboration and communication and just shifting the narrative of what it means to be a divorced people.
Yeah. And it's, one thing that I like to write about and think about, it's like we are all stitches of the same society and people are watching. Your kids are watching, of course.
Right.
But we are, I mean, this, so like one of my favorite stories, this was my first book. There was this mom, she was miserable in a relationship and she was, she probably would have been one of your clients or book or order your book. And she was like, and she's like, oh, but I'm so afraid of being a single mom. I don't know if I can swing it. And there was this mom in her community and they went to the same daycare, the kids, and they weren't even friends. I don't even think they were friendly. She just watched this woman from afar. And this woman, like, she owned a small business in the community and she just like looked good. Her kids were well behaved. She was very kind with the staff at the daycare center. And she just seemed like she had her shit together.
Yeah.
And like, I think the bar was kind of low for this woman, for the woman that I'm speaking with. And she's like, just seeing her, that she could keep it going on and her kids were fine, you know, and she had, you know, the bandwidth to be kind to people around her. And she was like, that just gave her the confidence that she could move forward with this hard decision. And I see that happening in this very more specific work that I do around promoting equal parenting. So we only have, I think it's 6 now states where there's a rebuttable presumption of equal parenting on the books. The laws have been passed just in a few years. But throughout the country, I hear from people all the time. They're like, I don't understand what you're doing, Emma, because I live in Kansas City, or I live in South Florida, or I live whatever. And it's the law in my state and everybody does 50-50. So what the hell? And I'm like, no, actually, it's not the law in your state, but there has become a culture of equal parenting in that community. And it's
Yeah.
probably some judges that were sick. Like, typically what I am sussing out, this is very non-scientific. There's usually female judges
Mm-hmm.
who were like sick. Frankly, they get sick of women. It's women
Yeah.
advocating against women who they see behaving poorly. So women coming through family court or divorce court, whatever it is in your state, and, you know, under earning, arguing for more time, false out, all the baloney that makes divorce unduly horrible. And they're like, no, ladies, we're not going to do that. Just 50-50, get out of here. Right. I've got real serious cases I need to deal with. You're wasting my time. And
Yeah.
so then that informs the lawyers in that community. So average Joe's coming, oh my God, my marriage is falling apart. What should I do? Should I fight for the kids? She's like, no, the judge, you're assigned to this judge. That judge is going to do 50-50. So just do 50-50. You're making your life a lot easier. Then that family does 50-50. They're talking to the moms on the playground. It just becomes part of the fabric of the community. And that is how change happens.
Yeah.
Outlaws, right? Without having to fight these laws. And I've got a lot to say about that for another meetup, not today. But right. So, you know, it's like people are watching you. Do have a better divorce. You have a healthier
Yeah.
co-parenting, a more gracious, forgiving co-parenting relationship when you
Yeah.
have like measurable challenges like addiction in your family, right? Because everybody's got shit in their families. Let's just embrace it and be adults about it.
You know, I think
Oh,
that's,
here, Sherry says she thinks New Jersey is 50-50, and it's not. Actually, anecdotally, New Jersey sucks. And there's New York and New Jersey, so many lawyers and they muck it all up. But New Jersey, depending, it sounds like you have it in your community and that's great, but it's not the law.
yeah, interesting. Interesting. I want to go to Anne's, Anne had a question in here that I have thoughts on too, but it's addressed to you, Emma. Do you want to, Anne says, I have a friend who has had endless custody challenges with her daughter's father. She got full custody, but the dad is constantly changing the times he comes or flaking. And in some ways, it feels like an ongoing power flex. She's constantly enraged with him. Advice.
Well, why does she have to get full custody? There is usually substantiated abuse. That's very unusual.
Yeah, it is.
So either he is abusive,
Yeah,
or the question is, why does she have it? And if it was 50-50, what's he got to fight about? Like the studies, and I've got plenty of stories, like when you do that 50-50, it takes so much of the fight out,
that's
right? Because
right.
no one's a winner and no one's a loser. Everyone's just equal.
Yeah. But if there is a case of abuse, right? Because if she's got full custody and he has, um, you know, changing the time, I would say, to engage the use of a co-parenting specialist so that she's not the one saying, because what happens is, right, if she has full custody, essentially she has all the power. And so every time he wants to see the kids, he basically has to ask her or like make a plan with her. And that's triggering him in some way.
Yeah, it's just accentuating her control. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, but it's also giving him like the bullseye to keep shooting for. And so if you have a co-parenting specialist who's the person saying, hey, this is not okay, you need to be consistent, this is what's best for your children, then you have somebody else who's sort of being the heavy in the relationship. And often this kind of personality will listen more to somebody else than to their ex-wife, who they, you know, don't seem to respect
And
very
that's
much.
like a maybe. I mean, if somebody's like that, that doesn't sound like a stable personality, and I'm pretty hopeless about that
Yeah.
character.
Well, I mean, I just think that there's ways, I mean, I think mainly for her to like unplug, I think she can also not engage by saying things like, I'm sorry, we're not available at that time. Period. right? It's one sentence. And then when he argues, I'm sorry, we're not available at that time. You are scheduled for, 2 to 4 on Saturday. If you can't make it at that time, unfortunately, you're right. So like the boundaries have to be really, really clear, but also not get into it with him because he's going
Hard,
to
and
be.
it is hard. I mean, the thing is I know these difficult, it always takes two. Like one person's being the perpetrator, the other one's the victim. It's never that clean. It's like two
Yeah,
human, messy people that fell deeply in love and made a baby together.
or not, or they just made a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, I would have more to say if I had more information, but
Yeah.
I do think that, I think that, to your point, Emma, that we have to be responsible for how we're setting the boundaries. And, sometimes, and I get it, right? We get triggered by them being triggered, and then we're back into our old thing. We're back into the thing that had this relationship get destroyed to begin with.
I know it. I'm guilty of that to this day. Like Vicky with my ex at both summer schedule. Like
Yep.
they don't go away. Like marriage.
They don't, right. They don't go away. That's really the key, right? They don't go away. So how are we going to communicate with them in a way that so we don't perpetuate this? I always say, like, we get legally divorced, we get physically divorced, we get financially divorced, we forget to get emotionally divorced, right? And it's like, if you're not going to get emotionally divorced, what's the fucking point?
And it's hard, everyone moves on, new relationships, whatever. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, but so Kate, so yeah, we don't agree on everything. So what are the things that you wanted to talk about that we have differences on?
God. Well, we don't have that much time. I
15
think,
minutes.
yeah, whatever. I think that we definitely, I mean, I don't even know that we disagree. I think we come at different angles from things like domestic violence. In my world, I am so aware that women can also be abusive. And also there are other stats that support that it is, overwhelmingly. And I think that's a cultural thing, right? We condition men to not process and deal with their feelings in healthy ways, and hope we are shifting that. But we have a lot of sort of male aggression and rage that comes out in relationships. And so I think that we have some differing opinions about that. And I don't know. What do you think?
Well, opinions, like, so like, I spent some time, I mean, your book had very large chapters about abuse, and that is a focus of your work. And I
Yeah.
had a sociology professor that I interviewed, and who does a lot of work on domestic violence. And she had a great quote. It's in the book. Can you read it to me, Kate? But she said, we've done a good job teaching men that it's not okay to hit, but we never taught women that.
Mm.
Right. And the most compelling, I can rattle off the numbers now, but the most compelling window to view gender and violence through is like, I just happened reading my New Yorker as a good liberal. And there was like it was like a oral history of the original, like one of the first domestic violence shelters for women in Cambridge. This was back in like the 60s, and they were like running out of an apartment, and it was this very grassroots, scrappy thing, whatever. And so it was like this very political feminist effort. And one of the leaders now in current times is reflecting back and telling a story. And she says, what we were just really operating under this, like fighting against the patriarchy and the assumption that, men were using violence, physical violence to control women, but it became untenable to maintain that position. This was back in the 60s because lesbians were coming in having been beat up by lesbians.
Sure.
And I'm literally writing my book, and I'm in the other window with my best friend, who's so good, liberal feminist. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I write about. And she's like, that is just so, and she's about our age. And she's like, that is just untenable for me. I can't get my head around that because we have just been raised to be taught that men are assholes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the numbers of women are more likely to beat up women than men are likely to beat up women. And intimate partners.
Sure.
Gay women are more likely to beat each other up than straight men are likely to beat up intimate partners.
Yeah.
So to me, that's just like,
So
and women beat up their kids.
Yeah,
right?
physical violence is not the only form of domestic violence, right? And there's a culture of entitlement, of male entitlement, rooted in the patriarchy, like, and so there's a lot, so the emotional abuse and the control issues, and again, not saying it doesn't happen with women. I would never say that, right? We have a lovely case history in my family. Um, and the patriarchal messaging that men have power and control and should do anything to maintain it. I think uh, I see it infecting intimate relationships far more.
Well, okay, this is just the most recent CDC stats. They're in the
Okay.
book. So 30 of, we're talking about physical violence, rape, or stalking.
Yeah, I saw
31% of men report that, and basically 31% of women. And then when we're talking about psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetimes, 36% of women have been victims of psychological aggression, and 34. So basically very close to being equal on both of those, both the physical violence and the psychological violence. And that's surprising that I had it taking a long time to get away from it, get into that. Like to just, I mean, again, I'm just messenger. I don't have an opinion. That's just the facts. I have an opinion about why we keep holding on to this notion that only one gender is a victim, right? How does that serve us, right? A lot comes with it. I mean, there's a whole industry built up around that. There's shelters and education programs and all sorts of things, billions of dollars that go along with that, but it's not serving us anymore because men aren't being served. And I know you talk about it, men are struggling. They are struggling.
They
And when
are.
the men in our lives struggle, we all struggle. And it's at the expense of all of us that we're ignoring this parity. There's a violence parity and we're ignoring it.
Yeah.
We have a,
yeah. No, I was going to say one of the things that I often think about is that the amount of damage, when you've got physical violence in a relationship, very often, because men tend to be larger and stronger than women, the impact of their violence can be a lot greater than the impact of the violence of women on men. Because just sheer physical size and brute force. And so that's one of the things that I think has to be taken into consideration. It's not just it is the violence, of course, right? But also it's who is the primary aggressor is not always the one who did it first. It's the one who can do the most damage.
Right, but then again, what are we measuring? We're measuring physical or psychological, right? It's messy. We have a couple of questions. So first Stephanie says, I've been married to both a man and a woman at different times. My wife is by far the most physically and emotionally abusive. And then switching gears here, Sherry asked, thinking about 50-50 time sharing, when kids are elementary age, would the back and forth during the school week be hard on the kids? I illustrate this a little bit. So it's a very common thing, because if we go to like the very traditional every other weekend, Wednesday with dads, right? I count it out because it's like, let's say the kids go to the dad's house on Friday and then they come home on Sunday, and then they go to, they get picked up and dropped off on Wednesday, right? And then it's the same, it ends up being something like 15 handoffs in a month versus, and there's a lot to be said about when the kids are little, like the time periods might be shorter or whatever, you work it out, you're a little bit more flexible, but by the time they're like, I think 5 or 6, like my kids on Fridays, they go to school from my house this week and they'll get picked up and go to their dad's house for the week. So that's only going to be 4 handoffs during the week. It's a lot less. And that back and forth, like you talked about, Kate, with your kid, I see it. It never goes away. It's annoying. It is annoying. And I think we need to prioritize that.
I mean, listen, I think about that all the time. Like when I was like, I wouldn't want to do that. Jesus, got to a point when my son was like really well, he still is like into his clothes, right? And so he would take his whole closet. He would go in and he would just grab everything, lift off the hangers and like run to the car. Now, I grew up in New York City.
So, I know you did.
So like, I don't even know how that would work in New York. But this is, I think that the week on, week off is, by the time they're in elementary, I do think I mean, it really depends on their ages and we did like 2-5.
Uh-huh.
But eventually we moved to week on, week off because it was just fewer transitions and, it gives them time to settle in. It gives them time to just like,
You know what? My kids were just complaining about it. And they're like, even, because in the, where like our beef is like, we split the summer half or 3 week, whatever. And the kids are like, it's such a drag. We don't care, because they're older. They're like you said, they're doing their own things. We only have a few more minutes left. And Natalie was talking about the percentage of females murdered by intimate partners 5 times higher. That's actually not actual. I was just sharing this on social media yesterday. It's only 1.5 higher. In 2021, let's see, I'll just round up for the sake of clarity here. About 1,700 women were murdered by intimate partner, and that number for men was about 1,100. So that runs up to about 1.5. It's not 5 times. There's another number that's out there that's like, it's looking at the percentage of men who are murdered versus the percent overall, because men are murdered at a much higher rate, right? Like, why aren't we talking about that? Like, what's going on that men are being murdered all the time and murdering? So anyways, but yeah, the back and forth thing is like, I think we have to acknowledge that these situations are hard and that they don't stop being hard, but we can deal with the hard in a humane and thoughtful way, right? Like acknowledging to our kids, it's not like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Isn't it great? You go back to your dad's. No, it fucking sucks. Their thing that they need, their wrestling shoes or their trumpet mouthpiece or whatever, it's always in the wrong spot, right? Always in the wrong spot. And
we
it's
had guitars and
hard.
amps that we were trucking back and forth between
Oh,
houses.
yeah. Okay.
And thank God we live in LA where we have cars. I was like, I don't know how we would do this if we were in New York. But, and I think that the bottom line is patriarchy is bad for everyone. It's bad for men. And the more that we educate men on the impact that it's actually also having on them, I think the more hopefully things will shift, because all of this is rooted in the systemic issues that we have. So,
And we're seeing that. I mean, as moms of boys, both of us, I mean,
yes,
numbers are there. Like the higher education gap, when we started talking about this in the 70s, there were 13% more men than women in higher ed. Today, that number is 15%, but it's that many more women. Is that a win? That's not a win. That's a fail. We overshot our wad, and it's not okay. And we really have to start having frank conversations about this, because you say like it is different, but guess what? Like, I love men. I love my partner. I love my kid. I love my brothers. They're like, these are humans in our midst that we have an obligation to care for.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Thank you both so much for an amazing, amazing conversation. I want to jump in and get everybody to their 2 p.m. meeting. At the end of all these sessions, I want everybody with their to-do list. Buy the book. I've put the links in the chat. Review the books on Amazon. I'm sorry, that's such a long link. Review the books on Amazon, because those reviews juice up the algorithm on Amazon, which will serve everybody better. And share on social media and with your friends about this as well. So I'm so grateful for this conversation. I'm going to share it with you both, Emma and Kate, so that you can share it with your communities on your social media. Right. And it sounds like maybe Natalie and Sherry and you guys need to like connect offline. Sounds like there might be some more questions to come, but I'm so grateful for you. And I'm grateful for everybody who shared their lunch hour with us. I think this is fantastic. It's nice to see you all. And have an amazing, amazing day. I'm wishing you all
thanks for all you do.
Happier, healthier divorce.
Thank you for everything, Anne. You're so amazing. And just thank you for all that you do. And Emma, it's been awesome connecting again.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.